Most Christian men live and eventually will die in the wilderness, stuck in a cycle of the same sins they're unable to break out of shame of who they've become, and eventual regret for a wasted life. This isn't because God has just left us in the wilderness to figure it out. In fact, he's extended his hand to us, given us the method to walk into the promised land and become the man God has called us to be. Today, we're going to look at the story of the ancient Israelites after their escape from Egypt, the mistakes they made that left them stuck in the wilderness for 40 years, and the one man who broke free and maximized his God-given potential. My name is Nate, and over the last few years, I've helped thousands of Christian men restore the physical and spiritual strength that God created them to have. And today, I'm going to show you how you can break free from this cycle and maximize your God-given potential. Before we dive into the secret in Numbers 14, we have to get some context. Now, as you probably remember from Sunday school, the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt for over 400 years. God appoints Moses to go tell Pharaoh, "Let my people go." Pharaoh says no, so God just unleashes hell upon the Egyptians. Eventually, Pharaoh lets them go. They escape, the Red Sea's parted, and they get to the wilderness. And what is the first thing the Israelites do after being miraculously saved? All of these incredible things done for them by God? They complain. Now, I can't say I would do much better. You likely don't as well. Instead of remembering all the blessings that God has had for me, time and time again, how he's prevailed, I instead focus on my circumstances and the things I don't have. So in the desert, the Israelites complain, they sin, they look to anything but God to fill that hole in their heart and satisfy their needs. After all this sinning, they eventually repent, and eventually God leads them to the edge of the promised land. They send in some scouts to take a look, and nearly all of them look and cower in fear. They make excuses saying, "We can't get through this, we can't defeat the enemy," and they walk back, and they get stuck in the wilderness for 40 years. And I get that's a few thousand years ago, but Satan is using that exact same strategy on us now. And if we fall into that trap, we will stay in a cycle, a wilderness where we can never change, where we're stuck in sin, and eventually we waste our lives. There are 3 signs that we've fallen into this strategy. Number 1 is comfort over calling. When the Israelites were in the desert, many of them begged to go back to Egypt. As crazy as that sounds, they would rather have slavery where they knew what they could expect and have just enough to survive than be out in the desert in discomfort. We are the same way. Satan throws us little cheap dopamine bites of porn, processed food, scrolling. It isn't good for us. We know that, but it keeps us just satisfied enough to not go out into the unknown and become the man God called us to be. Number 2 is circles, not progress. The Israelites wandered for those 40 years, repeating the same sins over and over. Whether it was sexual immorality, whether it was idolatry, all sorts of different things. They would fall into temptation, fall into sin, and eventually shame. We do the exact same thing, falling into the same sins no matter how much we say that's the last time, because we don't adjust anything about what's causing us to fall into it. And number 3 is isolation over brotherhood. When times got tough in the desert, the Israelites disregarded all of the leadership from God-appointed men, and instead they wanted to listen to themselves. Do you have brothers or do you have buddies? Do you have guys who are going to uplift you, convict you, and compete with you to grow you into the man you were called to be? Or do you just have a few friends you can watch football with? You need men of God around you. You need wise counsel. Satan has used those 3 things on men of God time and time again. But now that we recognize the problem, we can identify the solution. If this is hitting hard for you so far, the reason I know you so well is because that was me. For years, I was stuck in this cycle. I had a really bad problem with lust and pride, and no matter what I did, I thought I could just not break through from it. And the biggest reason for this is I was believing the lie Satan has told so many of us. We all hear it in some way. I don't have what it takes. I thought I wasn't capable of changing. I thought I'd always be stuck this way. And the truth was, I didn't have what it takes. And the sooner you recognize that and you admit it, you own up to it, and you admit something even more powerful, you can find strength. Yep, I don't have what it takes, but my God does. When instead of looking at you versus the giant, you look at the giant versus God, you can have the strength to overcome it. When you focus on yourself, when you obsess over your power, your weakness, your shortcomings, yeah, it's no wonder you're going to screw up. Satan wants you to remember all of those things that you've fallen for and make excuses for why you can't change. This is why we have to remember the story of Caleb, so we can go from wilderness to warrior. So we're going to go to Numbers 14. As I said earlier, the Israelites sent in a bunch of spies to check out the promised land. And nearly all of them said, "We can't handle this. There's too many of them." And they cowered back in fear, making excuses. But there was one man who stood out, Caleb. He served faithfully and believed that the Israelites could go into the promised land. But because of the cowardice of everyone else, they stayed back for 40 years. But God says in verse 24, "But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land in which he went, and his descendants shall possess it." So 40 years later, Caleb is 85. He goes in, he defeats the enemy, and then he is given a massive reward, a plot of land that his descendants lived on for thousands of years. That is the type of legacy you can have if you're a man like Caleb, a man with a different spirit. So what is that spirit? It is a spirit not of fear. As 1 Timothy tells us, it's of power and love and self-control. Caleb had faith in God despite his circumstances, and he took immediate action. And then he endured for 40 years. When you take this action, you are not going to experience results right away. In fact, Satan is going to throw different things at you to discourage you, to make you give up, and to go back to your previous life. So when it gets hard, good. That's a sign you're facing resistance from the enemy, and you need to continue to push. During those 40 years, Caleb likely wanted to give up. He likely wanted to turn away from God, but he didn't, and he was rewarded with a legacy that lasted thousands of years. When you couple faith in God with endurance, you can overcome anything. So I have one question for you. What would you do for the glory of God if you couldn't fail? Think about it for a sec. You were likely thinking too small. You were likely stuck in a pattern of mediocrity instead of thinking big about what you could do for God. And I promise you, if you fixate on that, if you believe in what you can do through the power of God, and you endure despite your circumstances, despite the adversity, you will prevail, and then you will be the man God created you to be. So here's the truth, brother. You can either continue to circle the same mountain of sin, of shame, of regret over a wasted life, or you can break out of the wilderness, become a warrior like Caleb, and leave a lasting legacy. Imagine if you today made a commitment to do something for God way greater than anything you could imagine. Imagine what your future wife, your future kids will say about the impact you made because you had the courage to step out in faith. But brother, you can't do this alone. Thinking you have the strength alone, where you're relying on your own willpower, will never be enough. First and foremost, you must fully submit to God. And secondly, you must have a band of brothers around you. I'm just now speaking about this, but I'm creating a community of men of God willing to do whatever it takes to maximize their God-given potential together. So if you want real accountability, you want real community, you want real fellowship, this is for you. If you want to join the founders of this elite community, DM me on Instagram at natefagen, the words Mighty Men, and I'll give you more details. Just as God describes Caleb in Numbers 14 as having a different spirit, he is looking for other men with a different spirit. Are you one of them?